So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Delegate Laura Charkoudian, one of the co-chairs of the Transit Caucus, and really excited to have this team here today to present on the Baltimore Metropolitan Region transit issues, both about what's working well, what we need to improve on, some potential policy and funding suggestions. We're really excited to have this. For folks who hadn't been with us on the earlier ones, this is the third of three Transit Caucus webinars, briefings. The first was on sort of transit and transit funding 101, and we had legislative services and we had MDOT in that one. Last week, we had folks from the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments talking about the Washington, D.C. Metro Regional Transit issues. And today we have Baltimore Regional Transit issues. And so if folks missed the other two and are interested, you can go back and find the recordings on our website. And this one also, as I said, is going to be recorded and folks can take a look at it. So with that, I think we'll just get started. First, I just want to introduce quickly and thank our presenters. Our first presenter is going to be John Laria from the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. Then we'll have Robin Budish from Transit Choices, and finally Brian O'Malley from the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. And they'll each tell you more about their organizations and then go into their presentations. Because John has to get off at 12:30, we'll have him present and then take questions for him. And then he'll have to leave, and then we'll have Robin and Brian both present and take questions for both of them together. And you're welcome to put questions in the chat while folks are presenting. I'll make sure that we track them and get back to them. So without further ado, John, take it away.
Thanks, Delegate. Thanks. It's very nice to see everybody. I feel like I'm in sort of friendly territory here, the self-selected Transit Caucus. I'm John Laria, the chair of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, which is a public body created by the General Assembly about a year or plus ago. And I'm a private citizen. Every day I get to be more so, but I'm not really a transit expert. I've been doing this work for a while in various ways, but I'm actually a lawyer in Baltimore. And the commission itself has various sectors represented: local government, industry sectors, state administration, et cetera. And we're charged with providing oversight and advocacy for MTA. And I'll talk a little more about some of the subtleties of that in a moment. We have several different work groups working on things, working on rider experience. What's the rider experience like? Working on project and program delivery issues. What does it take to deliver MTA's projects? We have a staffing group. We have a work group on LOTS, local transit systems, and also we've done an annual report, which was sent presumably to all of you in some blizzard of things that you've gotten, and we might send it around to you, or at least make it available, a delegate through your staff. But it's a good overview of the work that we've done. I sort of view us as obviously advocates for MTA and for transit, but also a little bit of your eyes and ears, an extension of your eyes and ears, because we are a public body. We work for you. That's the way I view it. And although some of you, and I see some familiar folks here, or even on some of the tours that we did for the Transit Caucus, we're out there trying to check on things and to bring you back information and insight. I was glad to see, as you mentioned, Delegate, the first of the tours, first of these sessions, MTA and MDOT did a fairly detailed presentation. I saw Administrator Arnold did a fairly detailed kind of content-rich presentation. So fortunately, I don't have to try and duplicate that. But MTA is unique, I think among major American transit agencies. It's a mode with an MDOT that's very unusual. If you've looked outside the state, it doesn't have any budget or operating independence. It doesn't have a governing board. It's not like WMATA or many other things which are really independent entities, even though tied, of course, to governments through funding and appointment powers and so on. Our commission does not have budget power over MTA. It doesn't have operating responsibility. I think we were kind of a step in the direction of, hey, shouldn't there be some group that is responsible for all of this stuff that's a public body, even if it's not a full board? with all those authorities. It's also hard to disaggregate MTA from MDOT for budget purposes, and it's hard to separate Baltimore core services, which are the things that we're most interested in by statute. So a great deal of resources at MTA, for example, go to the Purple Line. Don't get me wrong, we love the Purple Line. Purple Line's great. We want it to succeed, but we just, it's hard sometimes. A lot of resources at MTA go to the Purple Line, and it's hard sometimes to figure out what the core services in the Baltimore area need and deserve, which is really what we're charged by statute with doing. There's a study that our commission asked for, and I think has also been sent to you, but I will resend it, on the question of funding and governance in for the Baltimore Regional Transit System. This topic, as many of you know, probably all of you know, is before the legislature this year in two related ways, two different pieces of legislation. One is a bill to create a separate MARC rail authority, would essentially pull MARC out of MTA where it's been, and another to create a structure for separate regional authorities for the Baltimore, the Capital, and the Southern Maryland regions. The hearings on the first have occurred. The hearings on the second are actually occurring next week, and I'll be testifying on those as I did previously. That would not just be transit, by the way, Latter, it would be all transportation in those regions. This is a really critical discussion to have, because of the oddity of the current structure. And it certainly needs a serious look. I don't know that I know or that anybody knows exactly what it ought to be, but it's never been looked at seriously, sufficiently seriously. And the time has come to think about that and to think about what the upsides and downsides, benefits and burdens of such changes would be. So you asked us what MTA needs, and I think a hard look at structure is critically important, and I think it's going to happen. Is it going to happen this session? You would know better than I, but I think it is now sort of on the menu as something that we're really going to discuss seriously, and I think we'll get to a conclusion, hopefully at some near point. Um, but the other answer, of course, what does MTA need? And the simple answer really is resources, and by that I mean money, um, to do all the things that MTA needs to do. The draft CTP that came out in the fall was really a disaster for MTA. Following decades of disinvestment, it was really a blow that I think MTA felt like, and we felt like MTA could not readily absorb. For context, the light rail cars at MTA were still running the original light rail cars from when Camden Yards opened back in 1992 or something like that. There are 52 or 54, I forget the number, cars in the system. I think about 26 of them work. On an average day, we put about 19 of them into use. That doesn't make any sense. And the governor is fond of saying, and said in Burford testimony the other day, that some of them have caught on fire. So it's not a good situation. And metro escalators and elevators are not all working. I think that my sense is that technically an escalator elevator doesn't work. They're just stairs. That's really what you're left with. And it's really been an embarrassing treatment of a very important transit system. I will emphasize, as I did in my testimony, I wouldn't say it's unsafe. It's just very fragile, and you just worry that it's not going to work and it may break any day. And that's not a way to run a transit system. So the governor fortunately made the restorations that he did, yeah, as you know, in the final CTP. And certainly we hope this caucus can help us ensure that we keep them. But I just want to emphasize that those restorations are really a minimum, not a maximum. The language that we've been using around it is, and including the administration, thankfully, is that it's a down payment. The secretary will say, we're getting MTA back on track. This is not a mission accomplished situation. This is let's figure out how to make some investment in this system, which has been terribly underfunded, to get it to perform. And it's really state of good repair, right? And all the things the governor is talking about, although there's certainly replacement for the light rail cars, et cetera, the light rail system. This is not system expansion. This is not Red Line. This is not Purple Line. This is not expand. It is just making the thing work so that it can serve the people who desperately need it, because there are a lot of people who desperately need it, and attract new riders, which is really the key ultimately to having a system of choice and not just a system of necessity. I have a couple of slides very quickly. I'm going to do them, and then I will turn it over to questions and my co-presenters. Let me figure out where that is. I stole these from MTA, so I didn't set them up for you, but I wanted to just give you a quick summary. Hang on. Can you see that? Terrific. So capital needs inventory, the CNI, was mandated by the General Assembly. It's first published in 2022. It's updated every 3 years. Covers 10 years of needs. That means we're doing one in 2025, which is a good time to be doing it. It assesses the state of good repair and the state of good repair backlog. It does not include lots, purple line system expansion. It is just what does it take to get the current system running in a way that we think meets professional standards. So that's what the CNI is. Let me see if I can advance that. One moment. Oops. Here we go. Um, so as of this at lower left, as you'll see, as of the 2022 CNI, the predicted amount for annual state of good repair spending was 512 million. The previews are that that number will go up to 7 or maybe 800 million a year in the 2025 CNI. And I like this slide because the chart on the right shows you on the top what would happen if what MTA said it needed in the capital budget actually happened. And what would have happened was from 2022 to 2032, the state of good repair backlog would have essentially diminished, right? That's what you would expect. What's actually happening in the current budget is that the state of good repair fluctuates, goes down a bit, goes up a bit, but you have a sense that that backlog is not getting cleared by the current budget situation. And again, this is just state of good repair for the modes along the bottom. This is not about expansion or anything bold or earth changing. Um, on the operating side, the operating budget, of course, continues to go up. On the left, you'll see some of the reasons for that. Of course, labor costs up tremendously, contracted services up tremendously, and overall expenditures up. So you continue to have a very significant operating budget need. And then here a quick sense of the needs. MTA estimates that it needs $15.2 billion just to maintain the existing services. That's to maintain the existing services. And then for some system expansion, including the items listed at the top, $16.5 billion over this 10-year period of time. So the budget issues, and those are just a few. I just wanted to show you a few of those, just so you have some sense of what the scale of this is. I was a little disappointed to hear at the BRFA hearing a question that implied that we don't need to be doing this because not a lot of people ride transit in Maryland. Now, admittedly, it came from an elected official who's a very fine elected official. I know him from a county that does not have much in the way of transit. And I understand that it's difficult to try and get folks to see things outside of perhaps their local perspective. And he was pitching a bit for roads. And sure, the roads need help as well. But I'll tell you that in 2024, MTA gave 68 million rides. Not 68 million people. Obviously, some people take it every day, some people take it regularly, some people occasionally. But that's the way transit agencies keep track. That agency, underfunded and challenged as it is with all of the burdens we have placed upon it in 2024, gave 68 million rides to Marylanders. That is worth investing in. And I would just submit to you that we have to find a way to invest in this system. First of all, state of good repair, stabilizing it as the governor has proposed this year. And then we have got to find a way to invest more deeply in the system so that it can continue to be stabilized and continue to grow. So that's my basic framing of it. I'd be happy to take questions if you have them. And I know that both Brian and Robin have more to say on this subject. They are tremendous advocates. I'm a public sector chair, basically. We're incredibly lucky to have CMTA, Transit Choices, and others on the scene who continue to press the folks in the public sector and in the broader public for changes and for improvements. So, Delegate, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm happy to take a few questions if it's helpful. I do have about, I don't know, 7 minutes or so before I need to leave.
Thank you. So we're going to take questions for John before we move on to Robin. If anyone has questions, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Happy to take any follow-up at any time. I think you know how to reach me. So if that's useful to you, please do.
Great. And John, I think if you are going to go ahead and share those slides with us as well as the other documents that you mentioned, and we'll make sure they sort of get sent out to the members of the caucus along with the recording of this
Sure.
briefing.
Yep.
I don't see any questions. Okay, well
Well,
then,
I'm going to hang on as long as I can, but thank
sure
you so
thing. If
much for the
anyone has a,
opportunity.
that's great. Thanks. Thank you for joining us and thanks for making it work on a day that is a tight schedule for you. So we'll pass it on to Robin. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Delegate, and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be joining you today on behalf of Transit Choices. I've been the executive director of this organization since its inception over a decade ago. It's really hard to believe. Our mission is to advocate for a multimodal, interconnected public transit system for all Marylanders. And when I speak of interconnected and multimodal, I'm referring to bus, bike, rail, water transit, scooters, and the like. We started this year with a new campaign, and what I'd like to do is to bring up the first slide. Bear with me one moment. We do full screen mode. Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
No, we can't.
Okay, let me try it a different way. I'm having a couple of computer glitches today, so let me
We
try
had
it
you
a
up
different.
before, I think, right?
Yeah,
Didn't
let's
we?
try it again.
There we go. Here it comes.
There
Yep,
it is.
you're good.
Okay, excellent. As I started to say, this year, our organization has embarked on, we think, what is not only an important, but a very exciting campaign that's titled A Vision for a Great Regional Transit System. And what we mean by that is a system that is equitable, reliable, frequent, safe, and both economically and environmentally sustainable. We recently hand distributed copies of our brochure to 141 delegates and 47 senators in Annapolis. We got very, very favorable response to our campaign. And I'm happy to share these slides with the delegate for distribution or to anyone that messages me directly. The brochure is divided, and I'm not going to go through the brochure now because I don't want it to be distracting to the conversation. I will go through it at the very end, but basically the brochure is divided into two sections. The first is the upside of investing in Baltimore's regional transit system. And then the second is obviously the downside of not investing in Baltimore's regional transit system. I'd like to mention that this campaign would not have been possible without the assistance of MTA Administrator Holly Arnold and her staff. Because when we outlined a vision for what a first-rate transit system would look like, what was really important was to work with Holly and her team to determine what actually it would cost, to put some dollars around that initiative. In our brochure, we are strongly advocating for finding a dedicated revenue stream to create a first-rate transit system. And I think this is really important in terms of people ask, why are you doing this? Why is this important? The crux of our argument is this. We believe that creating such a transit system would actually be cheaper for Marylanders than continuing to fund the status quo. This argument is essential, we believe, if we are to gain the backing of people who live in rural counties outside of the Baltimore region and people who never use public transit. And this sort of piggybacks on what John Laria just spoke about with respect to people in rural counties. It's really important that Baltimore should be an economic engine for the state, creating jobs, drawing investment, and increasing our tax base. We think that it's being held back by a high rate of poverty and crime. Certainly studies have shown that the biggest obstacle to people trying to escape cycles of poverty across America is truly a lack of access to good jobs and educational opportunities because of poor public transit. The next phase of our campaign is going to be a very aggressive social media campaign because we believe it's essential that we get this message out to the broader public in terms of their support. We are very active participants in the Move Maryland Coalition. For those of you that may not be familiar with that coalition, MOVE stands for Mobilizing Opportunities for Vital Economic Growth. And this coalition was formed to support the Moore-Miller administration's plan to invest in Maryland's transportation infrastructure, totaling $420 million in annual state transportation funding. Transit Choices fully supports the governor's proposed investments. However, as John mentioned, it is simply not enough to get us to where we need to be. What it does, speaking of the $420 million, is to keep what we have now to maintain a state of good repair. But in the long run, we absolutely need additional designated funding revenue streams. We've been asked by the governor's office, as well as MDOT and MTA, to testify, which we have happily done in Annapolis, to both the House and the Senate, supporting the governor's proposed commitment. We will continue to provide both oral and written testimony because we believe that this is essential to Maryland's growth. I do want to point out that at the start of the session, the governor made some adjustments to the CTP budget. So there on page 19 of our brochure, I don't want to say that the information is incorrect. It's just that we debuted our brochure prior to his making amendments, and it's with respect to the Transit Safety and Investment Act. So at this point, what I'd like to do is to share the brochure. Brian, I'm going to try one more time to see if I can advance the slides, which I cannot. Are you able to pull it up and I will?
Yeah, I think so. If you stop sharing your screen, then I will share mine and show that.
Thank you.
Can you see the title slide?
Yes.
Great.
So I'm just going to page through very, very quickly because there's a lot of content and I know that our time is limited. So we talk about, as I mentioned, a vision for a great regional transit system, and we talk about, what is the issue? What are we dealing with at this time? Next slide. We also, as I mentioned, get very specific about what a great regional transit system would look like. We talk about not only the vision, next slide, please, but we also talk about what it's going to take to get there. And you see a great picture, of the state of the state house, the state capitol in Annapolis. And, that is why we're spending so much time and effort, really asking for support of the governor's proposed transportation budget. Next slide. This sort of piggybacks again off of John's presentation in terms of exactly, how much funding we need, additional funding to reach our goal. We talk about it over the next, 10 years, both for operating funds, as well as capital funding. Next slide. Our present situation, I really love this graphic because it shows, just that we need to, basically Maryland's deserve, a better, more improved, expanded public transit system. The current system that we have now is failing. People can't get to jobs, to school, to educational opportunities, healthy food, healthcare in a reliable and efficient manner. So we want to change that. Next slide. What's in it for us? This particular slide speaks to people in rural areas of Maryland. They don't have public transit, or at least they don't have the public transit that they need. So we talk about why it's important to include them in the conversation and also to include them in the vision. Next slide. Now we get to the downside of not investing in Baltimore's regional transit system. You'll see it's sort of grainy black, that was intentional. Next slide, please. These are the avoidable outcomes, that we believe will hurt Maryland. We talk about the core bus program, which is Baltimore's bus network. We talk about light rail modernization. Our cars are catching on fire. Our cars are old, dated, and desperately need to be replaced. Next slide. We talk about our metro rail system. These are things that desperately need our time, attention, and money. So it's Metro Rail, it's MARC Train, red line funding. I mean, that would be the largest, transportation project in our history. We need to find the funding to bring this project to fruition. And of course, the MTA in terms of their struggles every day to keep what we have running on the ground optimally. Next slide. This is sort of the last slide of our brochure, but we talk about, what we can do to avoid these outcomes and really deliver and build a better future for all of Maryland residents. Our goal at Transit Choices is we really want to work hard and are committed to finding the solutions to secure sustainable funding for a first-rate regional transit system, not only in the Baltimore region, but really for everyone, not just people that what we call sort of the dependent transit rider, but those that we want to introduce public transit to. So it is access, it is opportunity, and that is something that our campaign will carry out. We will be, amplifying this message. We will be talking with state and city leadership because we really want to see an improved system for all Marylanders. That concludes my presentation for today, but am I taking questions now, or I'm happy to wait until the conclusion of Brian's presentation?
I think we're doing okay on time. If folks have questions now specifically to your presentation, is there anyone who has questions, either want to come on camera and ask or put a question in the chat? Okay, we will keep rolling. So go ahead, Brian. Oh, wait, looks like we got one. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I did want to ask
There you
on
go.
this conversation about specific funding sources, where your organization comes out in terms of a regional authority for the Baltimore metropolitan area.
Thank you. That is a great question. Our organization has not taken a position on this issue as of this date. What we wanted to do was to respect the process that the BRTA, Baltimore Regional Transit, I should say BRTC, Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, is going through. They've come up with 3 potential solutions. They are further discussing and debating those. We are part of all of those discussions, and at the proper time, we will make a recommendation and support a particular entity moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Brian, I think we're passing it to you.
Okay. Let me. Can you see my slide on the screen? Okay, great. Thanks. So, thanks so much for the work you do as the Transit Caucus. It's exciting to see legislators come together to pay attention to the topic of public transportation, which is a great tool in your toolkit for improving conditions for all Marylanders. And it's exciting to see your track record of getting support, often bipartisan support for bills and passing bills. I'm with the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization based in Baltimore that advocates for a better region through investment in transportation options. And I'll try not to be redundant to what John and Robin presented already, although I support what they said. And instead, we'll try to highlight a few things that I just want to make sure you take away from today's conversation. The first one is the fact that about 25,000 students rely on the Baltimore Regional Public Transportation System to get to school. They don't have yellow school bus. They get an S pass, a student pass to ride the MTA. And the idea there is that we're already running MTA buses and trains, and so it would be efficient to give students a pass to ride that system rather than to pay for a separate yellow bus system. But as a number of studies have shown, we're failing these students. We're not getting them to school efficiently and reliably. An Open Society Institute Baltimore study in 2012 found that late buses, skip stops, and rude drivers were major barriers to students getting to school on time, and that students who miss school, it affects their graduation rates and their performance, not surprisingly. More recently, the Fund for Educational Excellence in 2021 interviewed 274 current students and their families, and they reported long multi-trip commutes, late arrivals, safety concerns, and more that were affecting their ability just to get to school to begin their school day. And very recently, last month, the Baltimore Banner um, published a story that was over a year in reporting. And they found a couple of things. When everything runs on time, the average student's trip to school on mass transit takes about 40 minutes, which is more than twice as long as students in neighboring Baltimore County spend on yellow buses, and longer than the average adult's commute to work. So it's taking students a lot of time when the buses run on time. They also found that things don't always run on time. In fact, 1 in 4 buses students try to board during their morning commutes won't be on time or won't show up at all. So the reliability problems with the MTA system are affecting kids getting to school. Principals say they don't schedule important classes during the first period because they know so many kids will arrive late because of the failures of the transportation system. And so that's sort of the cart driving the horse there, where principals should be focused on educating students, and they're instead scheduling around the unreliability of the system. The next thing I want you to keep in mind when thinking about the Baltimore region's transit needs is connecting people and jobs. That's important to employers, that's important to households, and it's important to the state's economy. And we're not connecting enough people to regional jobs via public transportation. This is a graphic that the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance created using data from the University of Minnesota's Accessibility Observatory, where we compared access to jobs via transit in the Baltimore region with peer regions. This graphic happens to show Portland, Oregon, which is a similarly sized region, but we also track it against all of our peers. And what you can see in the red circle represents the jobs that the average resident can reach in 60 minutes or less using transit. And the black circle represents all the jobs in the metropolitan region. And so this circle is about 8.5% of the region's jobs that a person relying on transit can get to. So in other words, when you are relying on transit to get to a job, your universe of job opportunities just shrank by 90% or more. And unfortunately, we're trending in the wrong direction. When we started tracking this in 2015, the number was 11%, and it's progressively decreased. And now a person relying on transit can only get to 8.5% of the region's jobs. That's bad for households, and it's bad for employers. And we need to improve the public transportation system, by investing in it and giving people a more viable option to use transit to get to work. Another thing I want you to take away from this is that the MTA is a lean operation compared to peer transit agencies. The MTA does more with less. The General Assembly required a study that was delivered in November of 2022 on workforce and compensation at the Maryland Transit Administration. And a few highlights from that. The ratio of supervisors to supervisees is much lower at MTA than at peer agencies. And the lack of supervisors can affect performance. If one supervisor is in charge of 89 bus operators versus 52, they have less attention to give to each bus operator. And so that affects absenteeism and the reliability of the service. You can also see it here, the ratio of employees to the amount of service that the agency is putting out. MTA has fewer employees per revenue vehicle than all of its peers. You can, for example, our local example, you can see WMATA at the bottom with nearly double the amount of employees to the amount of service they're putting out. And compensation is also below the peer averages for a lot of leadership positions. So to underscore just the notion that it's a lean operation, we're asking them to do more with less. Um, One other thing I want to leave you with before we get to solutions is that the MTA, the Baltimore Regional Transit System, has not seen expansion of its capital infrastructure since 1997. Um, and when you look to the other MDOT modal administrations, the other business units of MDOT, we're expanding them all the time. The most recent expansions, you don't have to look very far back in time. December for the State Highway Administration, December for BWI, last year for the Port of Baltimore, um, 2023 for WMATA, with the Purple Line also under construction currently. But we have to look back all the way to 1997 for the last time we expanded the Baltimore Regional Transit System. And our peers are surpassing us. Minneapolis, Denver, San Diego have all added significant miles of light rail, commuter rail, and/or trolley. Pittsburgh and Charlotte. And I included Washington on here, which is a larger region, larger system, but is our nearest neighbor. But the point being that the lack of investment in Baltimore's transit system is leaving people behind. Um, you can also see it in how much service is being delivered. You might remember there was a lot of fanfare around Baltimore Link, which launched in 2018. But since 2016, we've actually seen a decrease in the amount of service being put out on the street by MTA. Um, a slight decrease in bus, significant decreases in light rail and metro subway, and an ever so slight, almost flat level for MARC. Um, the reason for the significant decreases in light rail and metro subway are largely due to equipment failures that John and Robin alluded to. We're seeing our light rail and metro subway vehicles at the end of their expected useful lives. They need to be replaced. Fortunately, the metro subway cars are being replaced soon. But the light rail vehicles won't be replaced until 2031 or 2032, and that's only if we approve the BRFA, you approve the BRFA, and the final consolidated transportation program that funds that replacement. So that is a segue into solutions. We need to pass the BRFA and the final CTP in this session, just to maintain what we have. And let me be clear, I want to underscore what John and Robin said. What this budget gets us is maintaining what we have. It's preventing further deterioration of what we have. It's not expansion, though. Even if we pass this in the next 5 years, the light rail will continue to deteriorate before the replacement comes in 2031. We won't see buses improve. This does not fund needed improvements to the bus divisions where buses are maintained. It does not fund expansion of the bus service. And so that brings us to other solutions, which I ask you to also keep in mind. We have an update to the capital needs inventory due out in July. That's something that the General Assembly required in 2018, and the first one was delivered in July of 2019, and then it gets updated every 3 years, as John said. The last one in 2022 showed a large backlog of capital needs at the MTA, and we expect that will not have been diminished. Instead, it will still be there, and so needs addressing. So that's part of the solution, is fund the capital needs and the capital needs inventory. There's also a Be More bus plan that MTA has developed that's due out this spring. That was created with a lot of rider input and would be an opportunity to improve bus service, but only if we invest in it. And lastly, we have a regional transit plan that had a lot of public input required by the General Assembly. The first one was issued in fall of 2020, and it's supposed to be updated every 5 years. So a 2025 update is in the works. The number one priority out of that was the Red Line. Another top priority was the North-South Transit Corridor. This current budget does fund some of the design work for the Red Line, but it does not fund construction, and it cuts funding for the North-South Corridor. So we need to fund the priorities that emerge from that plan. And I ask for your support for greater investment to make that possible. So that's my contact info, and we will share the slides as well. I'll also share that Baltimore banner story that I mentioned about students getting to school. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. So now we will take questions for Brian or any additional questions folks might have for Robin. Okay. Um, I think, Brian, do you, so you're going to go ahead and share all those documents and the slides with us. That's fantastic. And I can tell you that the Transit Caucus Executive Committee is meeting and putting together sort of our priority asks, and they focus really on these funding issues. So very timely and appreciate that. I think the conversations about state of good repair and meeting the bare minimums of the state of good repair from a few years ago is sort of the bare minimum, and the need to actually meet state of good repair, sort of with current prices and current realities, is actually the bare minimum. And then beyond that, the need to really catch up and expand the system in order to really support the kind of economic opportunity and even educational opportunity and access to even just the public schools. Is crucial. So thank you both for all of your work, and we'll continue our work as the Transit Caucus. And I'll just take one more, I'll just open it up one more time in case anyone has any other questions they've thought of. Okay, well then we will make this recording available. It'll be sent to members of the Transit Caucus. It'll also be available on our website, so feel free to share it with anyone who might be interested. And thank you again for being part of this presentation and for all of the ongoing work that you do advocating for transit. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Cherkudian. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.